A girl of 18 stood beside a river of noise and steel, an island of quiet competence. Her name was Maya, and the grease under her fingernails was a map of her world. A world of worn tools and the smell of oil, a world left to her by her father. A 1968 Rolls-Royce Phantom, a custom-built ghost of a car, sat silent at the curb outside the garage, its engine dead. It was a machine so far removed from her reality, it might as well have been a spaceship. Its owner, a man named Al-Jamil, stood beside it, radiating a crisp, clean wealth that made the city air around him seem dirty. He wore a flowing white thobe and a red and white keffiyeh, his posture one of bored, insulated power. His personal mechanics, flown in from some sterile, corporate facility, conferred in low, defeated tones, their diagnostic tablets showing nothing but green checkmarks and a stubborn, mocking silence. The car was perfect. It just wouldn't run. Sal, the garage owner, a man whose face was a roadmap of busted knuckles and 60 years of hard work, wiped his hands on a rag. Sir, with respect, a car like this that needs a dealer. We're not equipped. Mr. Al-Jamil's gaze swept over the cluttered, honest garage with a flicker of disdain. His eyes landed on Maya, who was watching not the men but the car. She wasn't looking at the engine, she was listening to its silence. He gave a small, almost imperceptible smile of contempt. It was the smile of a man who owned the world looking at a speck of dust that had landed on his shoe. Maya took a step forward. The men fell quiet. Her voice was low, not asking for permission, but stating a fact. I can fix this, a soft, airy chuckle escaped Mr. Al-Jamil's lips. It wasn't a laugh of joy, but of dismissal, a sound as clean and sharp as the cut of his suit. Unless you have a spare engine in your pocket, little girl, I suggest you move along. His smile vanished forever in that moment, though he wouldn't know it for a very long time. He waved a dismissive hand, turning back to his own crew as if she had ceased to exist. But Maya didn't move. She held his gaze, her own expression unreadable. There was no defiance in it, no anger. Just a deep, settled calm that was more unnerving than any outburst. Sal shifted his weight, a protective instinct warring with the pragmatic fear of angering a man whose watch was worth more than the entire garage. Maya, maybe we should, but she was already walking toward the open hood of the Rolls-Royce. She didn't look at the pristine engine cover or the polished chrome. Her eyes were focused on a single point deep within the machinery, a place the diagnostic tools couldn't see. She carried no tablet, no complex equipment. In her hand, she held a single, worn wrench. It was old, the steel darkened with age and the memory of another's grip. Her father's wrench. A small crowd had begun to gather on the sidewalk, drawn by the spectacle of the magnificent, dead car and the potentate fuming beside it. A teenager across the street lifted his phone, his thumb hovering over the record button. Mr. Al-Jamil's voice was sharp with irritation now. I do not have time for this theater. Get her away from my car. His mechanics moved to intervene, but Sal stepped in front of them, his solid frame a quiet barrier. Let her look, he said, his voice a low rumble. 5 minutes, he wasn't looking at Al-Jamil. He was looking at Maya, and in his eyes was a flicker of something. Faith, memory, a debt to the man who had taught this girl everything she knew. Maya ignored them all. She leaned over the engine bay, her head tilted, listening. Not with her ears, but with her whole body. She placed a hand on the cold engine block, her fingers tracing lines of wiring and plumbing that the schematics said were flawless. The world narrowed to the space under the hood. The city noise, the impatient billionaire, the growing audience, it all faded into a dull hum. There was only the machine and the ghost of a problem. Her fingers stopped. They rested on a small, cylindrical component no bigger than a thumb, tucked away beneath the intake manifold. It wasn't a standard Rolls-Royce part. It was an addition, a piece of bespoke engineering, seamless and elegant. The other mechanics had seen it, scanned it, and dismissed it. It was functioning perfectly according to their instruments. But Maya felt it. A vibration so faint it was barely a tremor, a wrongness in the metal's hum. She didn't need a computer to tell her it was broken. She could feel its silence. She looked up at Sal. "I need the brazing torch. And a strip of beryllium copper." 3 millimeters, Sal nodded, not questioning. He vanished into the garage and returned with the tools. Mr. Al-Jamil watched, his arms crossed, a mask of incredulous fury on his face. This was beyond insulting. It was a farce. A child with antique tools was about to take a blowtorch to the heart of his $500,000 car. "If she scratches the paint," he began, his voice dangerously low, "I will buy this entire city block and bulldoze it." Maya didn't hear him. She worked with a fluid precision that was mesmerizing. There was no hesitation. Her hands, those stained with the day's labor, moved with the grace of a surgeon. She heated the metal, her touch delicate, her focus absolute. She wasn't repairing the part. She was altering it, making a minute adjustment to its internal resonance based on nothing but instinct and a deep, inherited understanding of physics. The crowd was silent now, 100 phone screens capturing the strange, quiet drama. The girl in the dark blue uniform, her face illuminated by the flame's blue cone, against the monument of wealth and power. After a few minutes, she set the torch down. The metal ticked softly as it cooled. She reconnected a wire, her movements economical and sure. She wiped her hands on her jeans, leaving a fresh streak of black. She then straightened up and looked directly at Mr. Al-Jamil. "Try it now." The silence stretched. It was a dare, a quiet statement of fact hanging in the air. One of Al-Jamil's men, a tall man in a crisp uniform, stepped forward. "Sir, I would advise against it. We don't know what she's done." Mr. Al-Jamil looked from his mechanic to Maya. He saw no triumph in her eyes, no arrogance, just stillness. He was a man who gambled with nations and markets, who made decisions that shifted fortunes. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. He gave a sharp, curt nod to his driver. The man slid into the plush leather seat, his hand hovering over the ignition button. He pressed it. The engine turned over once, twice, and then roared to life. It wasn't a roar, precisely. It was a whisper, a perfect, seamless purr of 12 cylinders firing in absolute harmony. It was the sound of flawless engineering, the sound of life returning to a dead thing. The crowd on the sidewalk let out a collective gasp, followed by a ripple of scattered applause. The teenager's phone was still recording, the lens steady on Mr. Al-Jamil's face. The man's expression was stripped bare. The condescension, the anger, the impatience, all of it had been wiped away, leaving behind pure, unadulterated shock. He stared at the girl, this grease-stained child who had performed a miracle with a wrench and a blowtorch. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a thick wallet. "Name your price," he said, his voice hoarse. Maya shook her head. She wasn't looking at the wallet. She was looking at the engine, at the small, shimmering part she had just healed. She then looked back at him, her gaze direct, unwavering. She didn't want his money. She wanted an answer. "That component," she said, her voice clear and carrying over the engine's soft hum. "The helical syncopator. It dampens sympathetic resonance in the crankshaft. It's not factory. Where did you get it?" The question threw him. It was so specific, so technical. It wasn't the question of a simple mechanic. It was the question of an engineer, an inventor. The name of the part, helical syncopator, was a private term, a name he hadn't heard spoken aloud in years. It was the project name used by the man who had designed it. His mind reeled back a decade. He saw a small, independent workshop, not unlike this one, but cleaner, more organized. He saw a man, brilliant and intense, with hands just like this girl's, hands that understood metal better than they understood people. A man who had built this component for him, a custom commission for this one-of-a-kind car. "It was the private commission," Mr. Al-Jamil said slowly, his eyes narrowing as he tried to place the source of her knowledge. "From an engineer. A genius," they said. "He worked alone." Maya's face remained a mask, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the old wrench. She knew the answer before he spoke it, but she needed to hear him say the name. She needed the world to hear it. "What was his name?" The billionaire hesitated, the name rising from a dusty corner of his memory, a name linked to a transaction he'd long since filed away as a minor but successful acquisition. He remembered the arguments over patents, the man's stubborn insistence on retaining ownership of the underlying principles. He remembered his lawyers, smooth and efficient, making the problem disappear. "Anson," Mr. Al-Jamil said, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. His name was Mark Anson. The wrench slipped from Maya's fingers, clattering onto the concrete with a sharp, metallic sound that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. The world tilted on its axis. Mark Anson was her father, the man who had died 5 years ago, broke and broken-hearted, his dreams turned to dust. And this man, this billionaire, had just admitted to holding the key to it all in the engine of his car. That night, the cramped apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in. The smell of reheated casserole hung in the air, a stark contrast to the phantom scent of gasoline on Maya's clothes. Her mother, Sarah, sat at the small kitchen table, her face etched with the familiar lines of worry that had deepened into permanence 5 years ago. Her younger sister, Lily, who was 10, was drawing at the table, a world of colorful crayons spread before her. "Dad was the smartest person ever," Lily said, not looking up from her drawing of a fantastical flying car. "He could fix anything," Sarah's hand stilled on her coffee cup. They didn't talk about him much anymore. The memory was a raw nerve, the grief a current that still ran just beneath the surface of their lives. Maya said nothing. She walked to the hall closet and pulled down a heavy cardboard box from the top shelf. It was sealed with brittle, yellowing tape. On the side, in her father's neat, block handwriting, was one word: dreams. She brought it to the living room floor and sliced the tape open with a key. Inside, nestled in yellowed newspaper, was her father's world. Stacks of notebooks filled with elegant, precise schematics, blueprints for machines that had never been built, and at the very bottom, a thick leather-bound ledger. She opened it. The first page was a design, a beautiful, intricate drawing of the very same helical syncopator she had just held in her hands. Page after page detailed its creation, the mathematical proofs, the material stresses, the successes and failures. But there was more. The syncopator was just one component of a much larger system. A revolutionary design for a variable compression engine that could double the fuel efficiency of any commercial truck on the road. It was a world-changing idea, sketched out in graphite and genius. Tucked into the back of the ledger was a folder of correspondence. Letters on crisp letterhead from Al-Jamil's corporate holding company, Al-Corp. Early letters were full of praise, excitement, an offer of partnership, a promise of shared patents. Then the tone shifted. The letters became formal, demanding. They claimed his designs were derivative of their own internal research. They offered him a one-time consulting fee for his time, a fraction of what the technology was worth. The final letter was from their legal department, a cease and desist. It accused him of attempting to extort the company and threatened legal action if he ever claimed the designs were his. It was dated 1 week before the car crash. Maya traced the signature on the legal letter. It was a crisp, impersonal scrawl. Below it, typed neatly, was the name of the signatory, Faris Al-Jamil, CEO. He hadn't just bought a part from her father. He had taken everything. The car wasn't a monument to his wealth. It was a tombstone for her father's legacy. Her mother came and knelt beside her on the floor, her eyes scanning the papers. She saw the familiar handwriting, the dizzying equations. Then she saw the letters from Al-Corp. Her breath hitched. "I told him to let it go," she whispered, her voice thick with old pain. "I told him we couldn't fight them. He wouldn't listen. He said it was his life's work. He said, I just wanted people to know my name. He had poured everything into that legal fight. He sold his car, emptied their savings. He took a second job driving a delivery truck on night shifts to pay the legal bills. He was driving home from that job when he fell asleep at the wheel. The official report said it was an accident. But Maya knew better now. It wasn't an accident. They had killed him, just as surely as if they had held a gun to his head. They had exhausted him, bankrupted him, and broken his spirit until his body finally gave out. The grief that had been a dull ache in her chest for 5 years sharpened into a blade. It was no longer just grief. It was rage. It was purpose. She looked at her father's designs, the elegant lines that promised a better, more efficient world. This wasn't just about money or credit. It was about truth. Al-Jamil had built an empire on her father's mind, and he had buried the man to do it. She closed the ledger. The quiet confidence that had settled over her at the garage returned, harder now, forged in the fire of this revelation. She knew what she had to do. The fight her father couldn't finish, she would. The next morning, the video was everywhere. It had a title now, Mechanic Girl vs. The Billionaire. It had 3 million views and was climbing. The comments were a torrent of admiration for her skill and derision for Al-Jamil's arrogance. But Maya ignored the burgeoning viral fame. She took the ledger and the box of notebooks to Sal's garage. Sal was sweeping the floor, the morning light catching the dust motes dancing in the air. He looked up as she entered, his expression grim. "Saw the video," he grunted. "You made him look like a fool. It's more than that, Sal," Maya said, placing the heavy ledger on his workbench. She opened it to the design of the syncopator. Sal leaned in, his eyes, accustomed to reading the language of machines, traced the lines of the schematic. He whistled low and long. "I'll be damned. That's Mark's work. I'd know his drafting anywhere." He flipped through the pages, his expression shifting from admiration to a slow-burning anger as he absorbed the scope of the engine designs. He had known Mark Anson for 20 years. He'd seen him toil in his home workshop, seen the fire in his eyes when he talked about his ideas. He'd also seen that fire dim in the last year of his life. He finally looked up from the ledger, his gaze meeting Maya's. "Your father was a master, kid. A true artist. These corporations, they're vultures. They circle men like him until they drop." He tapped a thick finger on the legal letters. "They stole from him." Maya nodded, her throat tight. "He tried to fight them, and it killed him," Sal finished, his voice flat. He was silent for a long moment, staring at the worn cover of the ledger. "Mark ever tell you about my brother-in-law, Frank? Big shot patent lawyer back in the day. Hated corporate bullies more than he hated rust. Retired now, but I bet he'd love to sink his teeth into something like this." That afternoon, they sat in Frank's dusty, book-lined office. Frank was a small, bird-like man with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He listened intently as Maya told the story, his fingers steepled under his chin. He examined the notebooks, the letters, his eyes lighting up with a predatory gleam. This is beautiful," he murmured, looking at the schematics. Then he looked at the legal dismissal from Alcorp. "And this is pure evil." He looked at Maya, a long, appraising look. "This will be a war, young lady. They will try to crush you. They'll say your father was a fraud, that you forged these documents. They will dig into your life, your mother's life, looking for any dirt they can find." "I know," Maya said. "Good," Frank nodded, "because I'm taking this case. Pro bono. It's been a while since I've had a good fight." Meanwhile, the story was evolving online. A writer for a major automotive journal, a woman named Chloe Sterling, saw the video. She wasn't interested in the human interest fluff. She was interested in the tech. Who was this girl who understood a bespoke Rolls-Royce engine better than the company's own mechanics? And what was this helical syncopator she had mentioned? Her journalistic instincts tingled. There was a deeper story here. She started digging. Chloe Sterling's initial article was cautious. Framed as a profile of the viral mechanic, she highlighted Maya's preternatural skill, the mystery of the custom part, and the public humbling of a powerful man. The piece was shared hundreds of thousands of times. It landed on the screen of a man named David Chen. David was a senior engineer at a rival automotive firm. 10 years ago, he had been a junior engineer at Alcorp, a fresh-faced graduate thrilled to be working at the cutting edge. He remembered Mark Anson. He remembered him as a quiet, intense consultant who had come to their R&D lab with notebooks full of ideas that were years ahead of their own. And he remembered the day his department head, under direct orders from Al-Jamil, had taken Anson's core designs, assigned them a new internal project number, and filed the patents under Alcorp's name. David had been in the room. He heard the arguments. He saw the dismissal. He knew it was theft, but he was 24 years old with a mountain of student debt and a career to build. He had stayed silent. The guilt had been a low-grade hum in the background of his life ever since. He had left Alcorp a year later, unable to stomach the culture. Seeing Maya's face in the article, so much like her father's, the same determined set of her jaw, was like a ghost appearing at his desk. The video of Al-Jamil laughing at her was the final push. It was the same dismissive arrogance he had seen in that boardroom a decade ago. He found Chloe Sterling's email address and wrote a short, cryptic message. I know about the helical syncopator. I know who really invented it. I have proof. Chloe met David in a quiet coffee shop far from their respective offices. He was nervous, his hands trembling as he passed her a thumb drive. It's all there, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Internal memos. The original patent drafts with Anson's name on them. Email chains from Al-Jamil himself, ordering the team to absorb Anson's IP and terminate his contract. They all knew the thumb drive was the key. It was the Rosetta Stone that connected Maya's father's notebooks to Alcorp's public filings. It proved, irrefutably, that the company's celebrated Greenhall engine technology, the cornerstone of their multi-billion-dollar sustainable transport division, was built entirely on the stolen genius of Mark Anson. Armed with the notebooks, the legal threat, and the bombshell evidence from David Chen, Frank didn't just file a lawsuit. He orchestrated a symphony of public reckoning. The first note was Chloe Sterling's follow-up article, published simultaneously in a dozen countries. The headline was stark: The Ghost in the Machine, How Alcorp's Green Revolution Was Fueled by Stolen Dreams. The story laid everything bare. It began with a now iconic video of Maya fixing the Rolls-Royce, then masterfully unspooled the entire history of deceit. It showed pages from her father's notebooks alongside Alcorp's patent filings, the similarities undeniable. It included anonymized quotes from David Chen, the insider who confirmed the deliberate theft. It ended with a picture of Maya, standing in her father's garage, holding the worn wrench, her face a portrait of quiet, unyielding resolve. The story was a firestorm. The hashtag Justice for Mark Anson trended worldwide. News channels replayed the clip of Al-Jamil laughing, but now it was juxtaposed with photos of Mark Anson's hopeful, smiling face from years ago. The laughter was no longer just arrogant. It was ghoulish. It was the sound of a man dancing on another's grave. Alcorp's stock plummeted. Investors panicked. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. The corporate PR machine, a behemoth that had crushed so many obstacles, was sputtering, overwhelmed. Their statements were hollow, full of legal jargon about unsubstantiated claims and protecting our intellectual property, but no one was listening. The public had the story it wanted, a David and Goliath tale, a story of a daughter fighting for her dead father's honor against a corporate titan. The narrative was too clean, too powerful to be spun. Maya watched it all from the quiet of her apartment. She didn't do interviews. She let the evidence speak for itself. Her father's notebooks, his own words, his own elegant designs, were now his voice, crying out from the past. Lily came to her and showed her the news on a tablet. They're talking about Grandpa, she said, her voice filled with a child's simple awe. They're saying he was a genius. A single tear traced a clean path through the grease on Maya's cheek. Yes, she whispered.
He was.
The pressure became unbearable. Al-Jamil was a man accustomed to controlling the narrative, to shaping reality with wealth and influence. But he couldn't control this. Every channel he turned to, every paper he opened, he saw her face, the quiet, accusing eyes of Mark Anson's daughter. He saw the video of his own laughter, a sound that now haunted him. His carefully constructed world was shattering. His board was demanding his resignation. His family was looking at him with a mixture of fear and shame. He found himself thinking not of the stock price, but of Mark Anson. He remembered the man's passion, the way his eyes lit up when he explained the physics of resonance. He had seen the genius and had chosen to see it as a commodity, a resource to be extracted. She heard the familiar purr of the Rolls-Royce and straightened up, wiping her hands on a rag. He got out of the car, and walked toward her. He looked smaller than she remembered, his shoulders slumped, the weight of his empire pressing down on him. He stopped a few feet from her. The silence in the garage was heavy, thick with the ghosts of the past. "I didn't come here to apologize," he said, his voice quiet, stripped of its former authority. "An apology would be an insult. There are no words for what I did." He looked around the garage, at the worn tools, the honest labor. "Your father showed me his designs. All of them. Not just the syncopator. The entire engine. He trusted me." He finally met her eyes, and she saw not a corporate villain, but a man reckoning with the barrenness of his own soul. He was a genius. I built an empire on his mind. And I destroyed him. I knew what I was doing. Every step of the way. I told myself it was just business. But I knew it was a confession, not an excuse. A flat, devastating statement of truth. Maya listened, her expression unchanging. She offered no absolution, no forgiveness. She just stood there, the living embodiment of the consequence he had tried to bury. The settlement was historic, a figure with so many zeros it seemed abstract. Al-Jamil resigned as CEO of Alcorp, and the company was forced to publicly acknowledge Mark Anson as the sole inventor of the Greenhall engine technology. His name was added to every patent. His portrait was hung in the lobby of the R&D center he had been barred from entering. But for Maya, justice was never about the money or the public shame. It was about the name. It was about the truth. She refused to let Alcorp control the narrative of her father's legacy. With the settlement funds, she didn't buy a mansion or a fleet of cars. She established the Anson Legacy Foundation. Its mission was simple: to provide funding and free legal patent protection for independent inventors, the brilliant minds working in garages and basements, so that no corporation could ever again steal a dream. Her first act was to buy Sal's garage, not to close it, but to expand it. She transformed it into the Anson Institute for Applied Mechanics, a state-of-the-art training facility that offered scholarships to low-income students, especially young women, who wanted to learn the art and science of the machine. The garage became a place of hope, a hub of innovation where the next generation of Mark Ansons could build their dreams in safety. Years passed. The garage was loud now, filled with the sounds of learning, the clang of tools, and the confident voices of young engineers. Maya, now a respected leader in her field, stood by the open bay doors, watching. A young girl, no older than 15, was leaning over a complex hybrid engine, a diagnostic tablet in one hand, a worn wrench in the other. The wrench was old, the steel darkened with age. The girl looked up, a smudge of grease on her cheek, and met Maya's eyes with a look of fierce concentration and unbridled joy. She was not just fixing a machine. She was building a future. In that moment, Maya knew the fight was truly over. Justice wasn't the check she had cashed or the CEO she had toppled. It was this. It was the open door. It was the protected dream. Her father's name was not just cleared. It was now a foundation upon which others could stand, a legacy not of what was stolen, but of what was built from the ashes.